book Think Again, the Adam Grant, is the continuation of the prologue. So let's go. At some point, you've probably heard that if you drop a frog in a pot of scalding hot water, it will immediately leap out. But if you drop the frog in lukewarm water and gradually raise the temperature, the frog will die. It lacks the ability to rethink the situation and doesn't realize the threat until it's too late. When I looked into the origins of this popular story, I discovered a wrinkle. It isn't true. Tossed into the scalding pot, the frog will be burned badly and may or may not escape. The frog is actually better off in the slow boiling pot. It will leap out as soon as the water starts to get uncomfortably warm. It's not the frogs who fail to reevaluate, it's us. Once we hear the story and accept as true, we rarely bother to question it. As the man gouge wildfire, the story we just realized in the previous video, raced towards them, the smoke jumpers had a decision to make. In an ideal world, they would have had enough time to pause, analyze the situation, and evaluate their options. With the fire raging less than 100 yards behind, there was no chance to stop and think. On a big fire, there is no time and no tree under whose shade the boss and the crew can sit and have a platonic dialogue about blow up. Scholar and former firefighter Norman MacLean wrote in Young Men and Fire, his award-winning chronicle of the disaster. If Socrates had been foreman on the man gouge fire, he and his crew would have been cremated while they were sitting there considering it. Dodge didn't survive as a result of thinking slower. He made it out alive thanks to his ability to rethink the situation faster. 12 smoke jumpers paid the ultimate price because Dodge's behavior didn't make sense to them. They couldn't rethink their assumption in time. Under acute stress, people typically revert to their automatic, well-learned responses. That's evolutionarily adaptive, as long as you find yourself in the same kind of environment in which those reactions were necessary. If you are a smoke jumper, your well-learned response is to put out a fire, not start another one. If you are fleeing for your life, your well-learned response is to run away from the fire, not toward it. In normal circumstances, those instincts might save your life. Dodge survived man gouge because he swiftly overrode both of those responses. No one had taught Dodge to build an escape fire. He hadn't even heard of the concept. It was pure improvisation. Later, the other two survivors testified under oath that nothing resembling an escape fire was covered in their training. Many experts had spent their entire careers studying wildfires without realizing it was possible to stay alive by burning a hole through the blaze. When I tell people about Dodge's escape, they usually marvel at his resourcefulness under pressure. That was genius. Their astonishment quickly melts into dejection as they conclude that this kind of eureka moment is out of reach for mere mortals. I got stumped by my 4th grader's math homework. Yes, yet most acts or rethinking don't require any special skill or ingenuity. Moments earlier at man gouge, the smoke jumpers missed another opportunity to think again. and that one was right at their fingertips. Just before Dodge started tossing matches into the grass, he ordered his crew to drop their heavy equipment. They had spent the past 8 minutes racing uphill while still carrying axes, saws, shovels, and 20-pound packs. If you're running for your life, it might seem obvious that your first move would be to drop anything that might slow you down. For firefighters, though, tools are essential to doing their jobs. Carrying and taking care of equipment is deeply ingrained in their training and experience. It wasn't until Dodge gave his order that most of the smoke jumpers set down their tools, and even then, one firefighter hung on to his shovel until a colleague took it out of his hands. If the crew had abandoned their tools sooner, wouldn't it have been enough to save them? We'll never know for certain, but Mangosh wasn't an isolated incident. Between 1990 and 1995 alone, a total of 23 wildland firefighters perished trying to outrace fires uphill, even though dropping their heavy equipment could have made the difference between life and death. In 1994, Storm King Mountain, Colorado, high winds caused a fire to explode across a gulch. Running uphill on rocky ground with safety in view but just 200 feet away, 14 smoke jumpers and wildland firefighters, 4 women, 10 men, lost their lives. Later, investigators calculated that without their tools and backpacks, the crew could have moved 15 to 20% faster. Most would have lived had they simply dropped their gear and run for safety. One expert wrote, "Had they dropped their packs and tools," the U.S. Forest Service concurred, "the firefighters would have reached the top of the ridge before the fire." It's reasonable to assume that at first the crew might have been running on autopilot, not even aware that they were still carrying their packs and tools. About 300 yards up the hill, one of the Colorado survivors testified, "I then realized I still had my saw over my shoulder. So even after making the wise decision to ditch the 25-pound chainsaw, he wasted valuable time. I irrationally started looking for a place to put it down where it couldn't get burned. I remember thinking, I can't believe I'm putting down my saw." One of the victims was found wearing his backpack, still clutching the handle of his chainsaw. Why would so many firefighters cling to sets of tools, even though letting go might save their lives? If you're a firefighter, dropping your tools doesn't just require you to unlearn habits and disregard instincts. Discarding your equipment means admitting failure and shedding part of your identity. You have to rethink your goal in your job and your whole life. Fires are not fought with bodies and bare hands. They are fought with tools that are often distinctive trademarks of firefighters. Organizational psychologist Carl Wake explains, "They are the firefighters' reason for being deployed in the first place. Dropping one's tools creates an existential crisis. Without my tools, who am I?" Wildland fires are relatively rare. Most of our lives don't depend on split-second decisions that force us to reimagine our tools and choose a source of danger and a fire and a path to safety. Yet, the challenge of rethinking assumptions is surprisingly common, maybe even more common than we think, to all humans. We all make the same kind of mistakes as smoke jumpers and firefighters, but the consequences are less dire and therefore often go unnoticed. Our ways of rethinking become habits that can weigh us down, and we don't bother to question them until it's too late. expecting your quick breaks to keep working until they finally fail on the freeway, believing the stock market will keep going up after analysts warn of an impending real estate bubble, assuming your marriage is fine despite your partner's increasing emotional distance, feeling secure in your job even though some of your colleagues have been laid off. This book is about the value of rethinking. It's about adopting the kind of mental flexibility that saved Warner Dodge's life. It's also about succeeding where he failed, encouraging that same agility in others. You may not carry an axe and a shovel, but you do have some cognitive tools that you use regularly. They might be thinking you know, assumptions you make, and opinions you hold. Some of them aren't just part of your job, they are part of your sense of self. Consider a group of students who built what has been called Harvard's first online social network. We know this story very well. Before they arrived at college, they had already connected more than an eighth of the entering freshman class in an e-group. But once they got to Cambridge, they abandoned the network and shut it down. 5 years later, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook on the same campus. From time to time, the students who created the original e-group have felt some pangs of regret. I know because I was one of the co-founders of that group, the first one, and we gave up. Let's be clear, I never would have had the vision for what Facebook became. In hindsight, though, my friends and I clearly missed a series of chances of rethinking the potential of our platform. Our first instinct was to use the e-group to make new friends for ourselves. We didn't consider whether it would be of interest to students at other schools or in life beyond school. Our well-learned habit was to use online tools to connect with people far away. Once we lived within walking distance on the same campus, we figured we no longer needed the group, although one of the co-founders was studying computer science and another early member had already founded a successful tech startup. We made the flowered assumption that an online social network was a passing hobby, not a huge part of the future of the internet. Since I didn't know how to code, I didn't have the tools to build something more sophisticated. Launching a company wasn't part of my identity anyway. I saw myself as a college freshman, not a budding entrepreneur, not a businessman. So since then, rethinking has become central to my sense of self. I'm a psychologist, but I'm not a fan of Freud. I don't have a couch in my office, so I don't do therapy. As an organizational psychologist at Wharton, I've spent the past 15 years researching and teaching evidence-based management. As an entrepreneur of data and ideas, I've been called by organizations like Google, Pixar and NBA, and the Gates Foundation to help them re-examine how they design meaningful jobs, build creative teams, and shape collaborative cultures. My job is to think again about how we work, lead, and live. And enable others to do the same. I can't think of a more vital time more for rethinking. As the coronavirus pandemic unfolded, many leaders around the world were slow to rethink their assumptions. First, that the virus wouldn't affect their countries. Next, that it would be no deadlier than the flu. And then, that it could only be transmitted by people with visible symptoms. The cost in human life is still being tallied. So, in the past few years, we've all had to put our mental pliability to the test. We've been forced to question assumptions that we had long taken for granted. That it is safe to go out, go to a hospital, eat in a restaurant, and hug our parents and grandparents. That live sports will always be on TV. That we can get toilet paper and hand sanitizer whenever we need them. As schools closed, teachers had to reimagine their classroom virtually. As offices shut down, leaders had to rethink their resistance to remote work, and once we got a taste of freedom, many for us dedicated, we wanted more. During the Great Resignation, record numbers of people didn't just quit their jobs, they rethought their work and their lives. Some picked up and moved to different cities and countries, others struck out on their own for the first time as entrepreneurs, freelancers, and creators. In the midst of the pandemic, multiple acts of police brutality led many people to rethink their views on racial injustice and their roles in fighting it. The senseless deaths of three black citizens, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, left millions of white people realizing that justice sexism is not only a women's issue. Racism is not only an issue for people of color. Many of those who had long been silent came to reckon with their responsibility to act against prejudice. Despite these shared experiences, we live in an increasingly divisive time. Proponents of free speech are silencing conservative voices on college campuses. For some people, a single mention of kneeling during the national anthem is enough to end a friendship. For others, a single ballot at a voting booth is enough to end a marriage. Calcified ideologies are tearing American culture apart. Even our great governing document, the US Constitution, allows for amendments. What if we were quicker to make amendments to our own mental constitutions? My end is this book is to explore how rethinking happens. I sought out the most compelling evidence and some of the world's most skilled rethinkers. The first section focused on opening our own minds. You will find out that why a forward-thinking entrepreneur got trapped in the past, why a long-shot candidate for public office came to see imposter syndrome and an advantage, how a Nobel Prize winning scientist embraced the joy of being wrong, how the world's best forecasters update their views, and how an Oscar winning filmmaker has productive fights. The second section examines how we can encourage other people to think again. You will learn how an international debate champion wins arguments and the black musicians persuades white supremacists to abandon race. You will discover how a special kind of listening helped a doctor open parents' minds about vaccines and helped a legislator convince a Ugandan warlord to join her in peace talks. And if you are Yankees fans, I'm going to see if I can convince you to root for the Red Sox. So the third section is about how we can communicate communities of lifelong learners. In social life, a lab that specializes in difficult conversations will shed light on how we can communicate better about polarizing issues like abortion and climate change. In schools, you will find out how educators teach kids to think again by treating classrooms like museums, approaching projects like carpenters, and rewriting time honored textbooks. At work, you will explore how to build learning cultures with the first Hispanic human in space, who took the reins at NASA to prevent accidents after Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated. I close by reflecting on the importance of reconsidering our best laid plans. It's a lesson that firefighters can have learned the hard way. In the heat of the moment, Wagner George's impulse to drop his heavy tools and take shelter in a fire of his own making made the difference between life and death. But his inventiveness wouldn't have even been necessary if not for a deeper, more systemic failure to think again. The greatest tragedy of Mangosh is that a dozen smoke jumpers died firefighting that never needed to be fought. As early as the 1880s, scientists had begun highlighting the important role of wildfires play in the life cycles of forests. Fires remove that dead matter, send nutrients into the soil, and clear a path for sunlight. When fires are suppressed, forests are left to dance. The accumulation of brush, dry leaves, and twigs becomes fuel for more explosive wildfires. Yet it wasn't until 1978 that the U.S. Forest Service put an end to its policy that every fire spotted should be extinguished by 10 a.m. the following day. The Mangosh wildfire took place in a remote area where human lives were not at risk. The smoke jumpers were called in anyway because no one in their community, their organization, or their profession had done enough to question the assumption that wildfires should not be allowed to run their course. This book is an invitation to let go of knowledge and opinions that are no longer serving you well, and to anchor your sense of self in flexibility rather than consistency. If you can master the art of rethinking, I believe you'll be better positioned for success at work and happiness in life. Thinking again can help you generate new solutions to old problems and revisit old solutions to new problems. It's a path to learning more from the people around you and living with fewer regrets. A hallmark of wisdom is knowing when it's time to abandon some of your most treasured tools and some of the most cherished parts of your identity. So that's the end of the prologue. Next video goes with part 1, individual rethinking, updating our own views. So that will be in the next video. Bye bye then. Thank you.